The Megami Tensei series started all the way back in 1987. Some of the founders of the company Atlus, such as Koichi Okada, read a trilogy of novels called Digital Devil Story by Japanese author Aya Nishitani. The books told the story of a young programmer named Akemi Nakajima who creates a demon summoning program. Accidentally, he unleashes Lucifer, and alongside his friend Yumiki Shirasagi, they go on to fix Nakajima's mistake by fighting Lucifer and his army of demons. Koichi Okada, alongside Genichiro Suzuki and his son Kazunari Suzuki, approached author Aya Nishitani with a proposal. They worked for the newly founded company Atlus and wanted to make their first video game. Having read the novels, they asked Nishitani if he will be interested in an adaptation of his first 3 novels into a role-playing game. The ideas behind its gameplay included navigation in first person, random battles played in turns also in first person, and one very important aspect that would revolutionize the RPG industry later on: demon recruitment. Players could enter negotiations with enemy demons to recruit them into their party. The idea was to train them, having them fight in battles, and then fuse them with other demons to get better demons. The name of the game will retain the title of the first novel, Digital Devil Story, and its subtitle as well, Megami Tensei, which means reincarnation of the goddess. Specifically, Okada and team wanted to base most of the events of their game on the first and third novels of the series. Both the game and the books included several controversial topics about religion, occultism, and different obscure philosophies. Digital Devil Story was released on July of 1987 for computer systems including the MSX. On September 11 of that same year, the game was ported to the Famicom. It would later enjoy other revisions on the Super Famicom and mobile devices, but not a single version has been released to date anywhere else in the world. Especially not in the West, since back then, religious topics in video games were often heavily censored. Despite the game not being able to sell overseas, Digital Devil Story was a commercial success in Japan. Atlus soon prepared a sequel, but this time without any relation to the books of Nishitani. Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei 2 was released as an exclusive to the Famicom on April 16, 1990. It was even more commercially successful, and it would establish itself now as a newly born video game franchise, despite also having ports to the Super Famicom and mobile devices several years later. No version of the game was ever released anywhere else. While the first 2 games were published by Namco in Japan, Atlus wanted to take care of their third game and publish it themselves. But because the previous title had deviated itself from the novels, even though it still retained several crucial elements, Okada and team wanted to reboot the series under a different name. The result was the removal of the term Digital Devil Story, and instead they added the name Shin, and therefore Shin Megami Tensei was born. Since their idea of a slight reboot while continuing the series was founded, Okada and team decided to remake the second Digital Devil Story game, but incorporating new ideas. Once again, renowned artist Kazuma Kaneko took care of the character and demon designs, and sooner rather than later, the first Shin Megami Tensei game was born. It was released on October 30 of 1992 for the Super Famicom. Once more, however, the game's religious themes and dark philosophical ideas were no good for the West, and despite having several ports on different systems such as the PC Engine, the PlayStation and the Game Boy Advance, it wouldn't be localized until its port for iOS on 2014 in Europe and North America. Too late actually, considering most fans outside Japan had already played the fan-translated versions done by Team Aeon Genesis. Shin Megami Tensei was another commercially successful title in Japan, and so was its sequel released on March 18 of 1994, also for the Super Famicom, and also ported years later to several other platforms, all of them exclusive to Japan. So back in the mid-90s, Atlus was already resenting the fact that none of their games could be played outside their country. They wanted to start releasing some of their new games, as they thought their first several titles were already outdated, especially by the time the PlayStation era had a breakthrough in the video game industry. But because of both Nintendo's and Sony's strict policies back then, they still couldn't localize their Megami Tensei games. They tried their luck with a little spin-off called Jack Bros, an adventure game released on October of 1995, but for the Virtual Boy, That console being a huge commercial failure, Atlus then took a risk with yet another spin-off, now finally for the PlayStation in the West. The game was simply called Persona. Released on September of 1996, Koichi Okada and his team thought this could be the perfect gateway for the series in the West. Persona still had some controversial topics in its story, but by censoring certain topics, images and issues, it complied with Sony's policies for a release overseas. For its localization, the game was retitled as Revelations Persona. Atlus of America thought using a prefix will help people recognize it was part of a series. 3 years later, a port on the Game Boy Color of yet another spin-off called The Demon Slayer was also released in the West with the Revelations prefix. Both games, however, weren't as successful as Atlus was expecting, especially Persona for having troublesome gameplay and outdated mechanics. Nevertheless, sales weren't really that low on it, which helped Atlus decide which of their 2 sequels they will release. It was a game cut into 2 volumes, simply called Persona 2. The team decided Eternal Punishment was the part that will be more successful in the West and less controversial against Sony's policies. This game enjoyed more sales and was more successful than its predecessor, but by then, most gamers outside Japan still didn't know what Shin Megami Tensei was. Only a handful of spin-offs had been released, and Atlus was still craving for a major release of their brand in the West. It wouldn't be until Sony's policies began opening up to more controversial subjects during the PlayStation 2 era that Atlus finally saw the opportunity they were looking for. Shin Megami Tensei 3 had been a big commercial success in Japan, and they thought it would be a great idea to localize it. The game even had a director's cut on the PS2 called the Maniacs version. Fortunately, that improved version was the one selected for localization. It was released in North America on October 12 of 2004 under the name Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. In Europe, a territory with less censorship policies, it was named Shin Megami Tensei Lucifer's Call. Atlus had finally achieved its goal. The game met a critical acclaim worldwide, obviously especially in Japan. Overseas, the only criticism it had was its difficulty. It was too hard, but very rewarding at the same time. If you want to know more, I'll leave a video at the end called 10 Things You Didn't Know About Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne. Despite this, however, the game was a commercial success, and it allowed Atlus to continue releasing their series and spin-offs in the West. One such example was the release of Persona 3 on August 14, 2007 in North America. Atlus of America decided to keep the Shin Megami Tensei prefix on every title of the Mega 10 series released in the West. They will finally remove it from the Persona series with the enhanced port of Persona 4 Golden on the PS Vita. This will start general confusion in the West as if whether to consider Persona, which had already established itself as its own series, as part of the Shin Megami Tensei franchise. It also created a rift between fans that still stands strong today, unfortunately. Going back to the story, Shin Megami Tensei had been successful all these years, with the PlayStation 2 spearheading most of their releases. Still, Atlus had also worked with Nintendo for some of them, including 2 Pokémon clones called Digital Devil Children for the Game Boy Advance. The irony being that Mega 10 had pretty much popularized the creature capturing and training mechanic years before Pokémon. Shin Megami Tensei Strange Journey was released exclusively at first for the Nintendo DS on October 8, 2009, localized only to North America on March 23, 2010. Most of the European releases had to be published by other companies, as Atlus of America didn't have a branch in Europe yet. Anyway, while most of their games from the Mega 10 universe had been successful, including other spin-offs such as Digital Devil Saga and Devil Summoner on the PS2, the truth is they were nowhere near as successful in the West as other major RPG releases from other companies. Not even the initial release of Persona 4 on the PlayStation 2. Atlus eventually encountered several financial problems and nearly went bankrupt twice. In 2010, they merged into Index Corporation but still retaining their brand name. Index Corporation will soon dissolve and Atlus will be left on their own once again. That is until October of 2013, when Sega bought the company. Atlus has been a subsidiary of Sega ever since. This gave them enough financial resources to continue with their series, especially their fourth game in the Shin Megami Tensei franchise. This was released on March 23 of 2013 in Japan, quickly localized on July 16 of the same year in North America, but it will take almost a year and a half for it to see the light in Europe on October 30, 2014. It was a commercial success and it spawned a direct sequel called Apocalypse on 2016, released also worldwide, also to a critical success. So these games were successful despite not having Koichi Okada and Kazuma Kaneko involved anymore, two masterminds who greatly developed most of their older games. Even so, Shin Megami Tensei finally achieved mainstream popularity in the West. As of the making of this video, today, Shin Megami Tensei 5 has been released exclusively on the Nintendo Switch. And that is the story of Shin Megami Tensei, a series that went through several changes, retrospectives and controversies, barriers that Atlus had to overcome to finally achieve as much mainstream success overseas as it had initially done in their country of origin. Please know that this isn't the full detailed story of the franchise. I left out several important aspects of its evolution during the past 3 decades. This video was intended to offer a short summary of its long and influential career in the video game industry, so I hope you enjoyed it and I hope it shared some light, some general knowledge before you play or keep playing Shin Megami Tensei 5. That's all for today, guys. Thanks for watching.